Hey, welcome back ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about episode 7 of Skeleton Crew. So if you are not watching this show, then I think you're really missing out on something special. It's a masterclass in character development and world building, and I'm going to talk about why a lot of Star Wars shows need to start copying this formula. But the show isn't perfect. In fact, this past episode had one moment that I think could have been reworked to be a lot more effective if the filmmakers weren't withholding so much information from us. But I'll talk about that nitpick a little bit later. And in a bit, I'm also going to talk to Dodd Seitz and Pete Feltzer from the Around the Galaxy podcast to get their thoughts. As always, check out our merch store for exclusive shirts like the Darth Vulcan, and don't forget, we will be in Phoenix this week for our live show for exclusive breakdowns, in-person meetups, and we have a sneak preview of the show for you at the end of this video. So Skeleton Crew has been great because it's in the Star Wars universe, but it's not about the Star Wars universe. What do you mean by that? Well, so shows like The Mandalorian Season 1 and 2 followed around a space cowboy in the Star Wars galaxy. Now, those stories could have been set in any fictional universe, but they were set in Star Wars. While Ahsoka Season 1 was about the Star Wars galaxy. It was furthering the Skywalker saga and drew from so much lore and world building from Rebels and the Clone Wars that it was basically impossible for new viewers to be welcomed into that show. But because in shows like Ahsoka, the filmmakers assumed that you already know the characters as well as they do. So if you didn't follow the adventures of Ahsoka Tano in the Clone Wars, then you wouldn't really know who this lady is or why you should care about her.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Now, I'm not saying you can't make a show that's about the Skywalker saga. Of course you can make that show, and please do keep making those shows. But you have to admit, Season 3 of The Mandalorian was more about telling the story of Star Wars than it was about telling the story of the space cowboy and his cute little gremlin. And this brings me back to Skeleton Crew. This is a story that draws from inspirations like The Goonies and Treasure Island and E.T. Now, that story could have been set in modern day, or in the past, or in a fantasy world. The fundamentals of the story do not depend on the fact that it is set in the Star Wars galaxy, and that is why it works. This show consistently puts character development ahead of world building. I actually love that At-Aten has nothing to do with the rise of the First Order. Yes, I still want to see them put the somehow Palpatine returned. But I also want entirely new stories. Like this show is giving us our first look at what life was like in the old Republic, before that Republic fell 1,000 years ago. And this is also why I love the High Republic stories. They're fundamentally about space cops fighting pirates, which is a story that can be told anywhere, but we get to see it told in the Star Wars galaxy. But this episode also repeated a key mistake of the show The Acolyte that I hope is corrected in the finale. So one thing I love about Skeleton Crew is how it's great at reminding us what it feels like to be a kid. Watching it makes me want to sit down with a bowl of sugary cereal early on a Saturday morning. Now, of course, I can't eat all those cereals from my childhood because you're old. Because I want to eat healthier. So that's why I am grateful for Magic Spoon, the sponsor of this video. Like you guys know, I talk about Magic Spoon cereals on the channel all the time because they're one of my favorite sponsors, but the Magic Spoon treats have saved my life on many busy days. So these bars taste great and they are way healthier than a candy bar. Each bar has 11 to 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and 1 to 2 grams of net carbs. They are perfect for when you're having a super busy day or you just feel like having something sweet. In fact, my favorite flavor is this one, peanut butter chocolate. What are you doing now? Well, I am preparing a bowl of Magic Spoon granola. See, ordinarily, guys, granola is my favorite part of yogurt, but it is filled with so much sugar. Whereas Magic Spoon granola has 0 added sugar and 13 grams of protein. And it comes in flavors like honey almond and, of course, my favorite, peanut butter. So if you're not really a cereal person but you still like a tasty treat, I recommend this granola. It is so tasty. I actually can't believe there's no sugar in this. It is so good. And of course, guys, don't forget about Magic Spoon cereal, which has 13 to 14 grams of protein, 0 sugar, and 4 to 5 carbs in each serving. So to get started with Magic Spoon, use my code ScreenCrush or click the link in the description to try Magic Spoon treats or granola today and get $5 off. You can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. And Magic Spoon, guys, is so confident in their product, it is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee online. So if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. So click the link in the description to go to magicspoon.com/ScreenCrush or scan the QR code on screen right now for $5 off. Now, back to Skeleton Crew. So, in this episode, when Jad Nana Wood finds the credits, there's a moment where he lets them wash over his face. And the thing is, that moment didn't hit for me at all because we don't know anything about this character. And this reminded me of The Acolyte. Because Yoda is barely in it? No, because... That's a weird thing to say.
So what? I like Yoda, so sue me.
Well, in The Acolyte, we're introduced to these two twins, and all through the series, we're told that something really traumatic happened to them in the past. So everything that they do in the series is in response to this mysterious, tragic event that occurred years ago. But the show doesn't actually reveal that tragic event until the second to last episode. So for me, I had a hard time understanding any of the characters' motivations or even relating to them because the show was withholding this key information from us. Information that established their character motivations. Like, I never really cared that May wanted to be a Jedi, or that Osha hated the Jedi, or that Sol felt guilty about something. I think the creators of the show made a huge mistake by withholding this information for so long because the show never was able to give us enough time and breathing room in the present day for us to get to know these characters. Like on our Discord and on Twitter, I saw some of you saying that this show would have really benefited from being like 22 episodes long. And I agree. I think we needed just a bit more breathing room to see the kids working with Jude Law or going off on side adventures that didn't really connect to the main story.
What's your side quest, Demon?
And hell, maybe on one of those side adventures they could have crossed paths with. But, I mean, that's a nitpick. I love this show so much that I want more of it. But let's go back to that moment with Jude Law. I really think that we should have known something about this guy.
Who are you?
Like, Jude Law did get that monologue about being hungry.
We're all hungry! Because credits are scarce. There's never enough.
And you know, he sold the hell out of it, but we're being told that he's hungry, you know, instead of being shown that he's hungry. If we had more episodes, then we would have seen some of his backstory. Maybe he could have seemed to develop a real bond with Wim, and he could have told him a partial truth, maybe that he was a Padawan during the Clone Wars who watched his master die. If we could have seen a flashback of Jod as a child being lost, alone, and hungry in kind of an Oliver Twist Star Wars way, then this moment with the credits washing over him would have meant so much more. Like, normally our Star Wars villains don't have any nuance to them. They wear a mask, or they're scarred up, or they're ugly monsters, and they're scary. And I appreciate that. Up until this episode, Silva was more of kind of an inept Han Solo character. But imagine if instead we got this dark heel turn after we had spent some real quality time with him. Like, imagine that we got to know so much about him that we were really rooting for this guy. Or maybe if he had told the kids at some point, hey look, I wanted to steal your gold, but I promise I'll get you home, and I just want a small reward. But at no point did I ever think that this guy was going to be anything but a brutal con man. And frankly, I think the ending of this episode suffers from that revelation. But I don't just want to talk to you guys by myself all day, because I am joined here with Dotson Sights and Pete Felter from the Around the Galaxy podcast. Guys, you are two of the biggest Star Wars nerds that I know, so I think both of you like this show, but I haven't really had a chance to talk to you about it because of the holidays. So, Happy New Year, and Dodd, what are your thoughts on this episode and the series so far?
Well, I mean, as the series so far, I absolutely love it. As I've said before, I'm a major sucker for space pirates and anything space pirate related, and this show is an absolute feast of it.
And your entire look is modeled after a pirate, so it is really made for you.
Right.
It's like if they
Yes.
made a Star Wars show,
It's
I don't
hitting
know,
home.
say about a middle-aged white guy wearing khakis and a polo shirt, I'd be super into that, so it totally makes sense.
Right. And, like, to me, there's... so my main complaint about this episode is that it's too short. It's 24 minutes. It goes by super quick. It feels like we're just getting started in the middle of the plot. It seems like they cut a finale in half. But the theme that I get from it is, like, this is supposed to be this big role reversal. And I think, to your point earlier, like, I think written wise, like, it's a fun twist of having Jod be, you know, really like the double-edged sword of a pirate. We see pirates and they're either, you know, the Captain Hook bad guy characters, or they're the Jack Sparrow type, you know, kind of good guy.
Or like our
clumsy.
flag means death, good guy trying to be a bad guy. Right.
Exactly. Which, like, you know, and so far Jod has been this very Jack Sparrow-esque kind of pirate, right? Very friendly towards the kids, you know. He's like scruffy, but he's like kind of like the rough around the edges guy that you feel like you want to root for. And he wasn't that, right? In this episode, I think he does a lot to show that he's not that. And I have a hard time understanding whether or not he's actually conflicted in being that person, or if that's who he's been all along, because we don't have a lot of his backstory, right? We have a lot of this kind of, like, tangential things that people have heard about him, you know, the Crimson Jack, like other things, people have complete different aliases for him. but we don't really know who he is. And I went into this episode reading a tweet that this episode was going to give us a lot of his backstory, which turned out to be a misquote. He said that Jude Law said that this is his favorite episode because it says a lot about his character.
Yes.
Right? But it was tweeted across there as episode 7 is going to reveal Jod's backstory. And like, I was like, okay, we didn't really get that though. And
that's what Star Wars fans want. Like we can't live without knowing every single backstory detail, and we expect to see it in a
every
flashback.
Bit of Arabesh, every species, exactly.
Where did he buy those pants? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's really the bulk of my main complaint is I think this twist would have worked a lot better had we gotten those chunks and we could really know if he was really conflicted about being this person or if that's who he's been all along.
Yeah, the scene at the end, like I talked about earlier, where I was like, this feels hollow to me because I haven't seen this, if there is an inner conflict. Like I said, he's been a fun character, but, like I talked about earlier, Pete, maybe a traditional TV show model would have been a lot of fun for a show like this. But I think with streaming shows, these CG budgets just have to be so out of hand that they can't do seasons that long. But I'm sorry, what are your thoughts on this episode, Pete?
Yeah, no, so I agree with everything that Dodd said for the most part. I completely agree. It felt too short, and it just felt like, I mean, I can always tell when I watch the show with my 12-year-old son, because I don't even need to look at how much time is left, because my son goes, it's going to end here, and he's right every single time. He knows when it's, because it's just getting to that point where you want more. But I want to take a different stance on the not having Jod's backstory and why I think it's actually kind of very interesting. The only thing we know about Jod is what the kids know about Jod, which is what makes him a real wild card. I mean, that was very Spielbergian of this entire series so far, a lot of the camera angles. I mean, even the opening scene of this particular episode with the flashlights going through the woods, it was E.T. all over again. But I think since the kids don't know what could happen with this character, we don't. So everything is a surprise. When he was good to them and nice, how did he get those Eopies back on that planet a couple episodes back? We have no idea. We just know he did something. So he could be.
He traded their money for it, but he could have been lying.
We didn't see it, right? And that's the whole thing. So I think there's a lot going on with this character that we don't know, and I actually think that makes it kind of interesting and makes it more of a wild card because of the fact that, as we just said, we do tend to get so much. I mean, we got too much backstory, I think, on Boba Fett, for example, in Book of Boba Fett, unless that was going to be the whole show, right? So I think they did a nice job. Yes, if it was 22 episodes, fantastic. Then we could have gotten it and built into it. But getting it from the view of Wim and Fern and KB and Neil is actually kind of interesting because we don't know. Were we expecting to have SM-33's head chopped off? Absolutely not. It scared the hell out of us. But we also don't know what's going to happen at the beginning of episode 8, and I think that's going to be where the character really comes together.
Well, let me offer you a compromise here. So there was a point maybe during the show when Jod, especially in the conversation he has with Wim about being a Jedi, right? And I don't think he's force sensitive, by the way. I think it's magnets or something, because he would have used his force powers all through the show. But there are points where he could have revealed half-truths about himself. We don't even need to see them in a full flashback like I mentioned earlier. But there were other moments in the show, and you make a great point about everything is presented from the kid's point of view, very even in, we pointed this out in a breakdown, in E.T., the camera level rarely goes above the eye line of a child, and they did that in several episodes. But there were small points where we do see Jod talking to, say, the bounty hunter who he ran into at the spa, or other people. And in those moments, and other pirates and things, in those moments, we could have gotten glimpses at his real self. I mean, his name keeps changing. He's basically the Andy Kaufman of the Star Wars galaxy. We don't know who the real guy is, but we could have seen glimpses apart from his hungry speech that would, I think, made us care like that he turned this hard. I don't know. Did you guys at any point ever trust him?
Yeah, I mean, I think that your point is fair. This whole episode was about like role reversal and the things switching, right? We see how not just how he goes, but like in the beginning, we see the parents are starting off from the kids' perspective here. So you know, they're and any like even to the point where like the kids attack the pirates, right? They just have to seize the chip, and then they go unclaimsies. So like there was so much
Which worked so well, and I was surprised at how well that worked. He said claims he's in an earlier episode, but it really worked well. I love that.
Right, and honestly, when you put it all down on paper, it's almost like whiplash from all of the different decisions that were there. So that's why that's why I still feel very conflicted on the twist when it comes to Jod, because I want to believe that he's like, this is an act that he's putting on right now because he's got to be tough guy, because he's got to get the job done, because maybe he's in some serious debt or some situation like that. But that's because I'm a sucker for pirates. I'm always a sucker for the good pirate story, and I recognize that coming into it. So like, for me, knowing if he's the good wolf or the bad wolf kind of thing, which I think is the whole reason why the first captain was a wolf situation.
Cute.
Is that breaking factor. So I did trust him, but I don't know if that's just because I'm a sucker for pirates.
Pete, what about you? Did you ever think he was going to end up being a pirate with a heart of gold?
Yeah, from the very beginning.
Really?
Okay, I actually did. And I think maybe it's because of, Jude Law. Maybe it was just the way he portrayed it. So it's really funny to watch social media and to watch the way people last night or as soon as the show ended, they turned on Jod like bad milk. Like they just went after him.
Well, he killed the lovable droid, which is the thing in Star Wars. You can kill younglings and we'll still root for you.
Right.
But if you kill a lovable droid, like if somebody ever put a lightsaber through, Luke Skywalker could put a lightsaber through BB-8 and people would hate him.
This is true. This is true. But I don't know. I feel like there's something more to it. I feel like he's protecting the kids. I feel like there's something behind when he said, "I'm glad I got a good look at your parents." I think there's something that he needs to know there. And I do feel like, in a way, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz in that, and I've seen a couple people have those sort of theories. I'm not going down that road completely, other than to say there's that moment where in this episode, Jod points out the faults of every one of the kids. And kind of reminds them and reminds us, where do they need to sort of harden up? Where do they need to get their strength back? What do they need to do? So I think I still believe, I still feel like he's got the kids' best interest in mind. He might not know how to do it exactly, but I really do feel like he's fighting for the kids. And I know that doesn't feel like it based on what we just saw, but...
But I
feel the same way too, because I'm worried about it being just like pure cope of thinking that like that same idea. Like I don't know if him throwing that I'm looking at your parents and talking about like threatening to kill your parents there at the end was really him, trying to toughen them up, or if it was him literally trying to be like, no, you've got to be mean to them. You've got to treat them like everybody else kind of thing, like, and trying to sever that in himself and having that personal conflict. But that, man, does that feel like massive coat for me to try to just like write it under. Like,
I
he was never wrong,
on this. I have a totally different read on this. I looked at it as, I got a good look at your parents. I know they're not a threat. And then when he goes off, right, when he finally just, like you said, Pete, he tells them all of their flaws. Maybe you're a tough love kind of dad, and you're trying to harden your own kids up by naming them Sue and stuff like that. But for me, I read that as, oh, he's finally free from them. He can say what's actually been on his mind this whole time. Like, he breaks Wim's heart when he looks at him and says, "You're the worst one," because Wim is the guy who advocated for him. And, he calls them spoiled. And I'm guessing, however he was brought up very unspoiled and very hard, and he resents the way they were brought up. Could be. I mean, I don't necessarily want him to be a Padawan upon Krell like people in our Discord were theorizing, or even a Padawan. We've seen that story twice, at least. But something in there would have, I think, helped in those final moments. But like you guys said, the episode was really short and definitely felt like it should have been a two-parter with 7 and 8. I think we've nitpicked this to death, right? We all agree we love this show. Pete, for you, right? I went over earlier, I compared this show to Ahsoka. In past episodes, I've compared it to the Book of Boba Fett. And I said that what I think this show does really well is it's telling a story that could have been told in any universe. They just get to tell it in Star Wars, which I think is where some other Star Wars stories maybe fell short. Because even the sequel trilogy was ultimately about the Star Wars original trilogy. It was characters reacting to those characters. And so this feels very non-meta and very just straightforward, and I wish more people were watching it. What are you digging about this show, Pete?
I think exactly what you just said is one of the most important things about it is, and it's funny, again, because we're so deeply entrenched in social media, and we do content for this is what we do. So we're so deeply entrenched. But what's fun for me is to try to watch it without looking for all those other aspects of the Star Wars universe. There's all the theories about, how is it connected to the Old Republic, and how is it the High Republic, and all those different, whose lightsaber was that he got? Is it somebody that we saw in a comic book? I don't think that matters at all. And I agree. I think one of the things that I'm loving about this show is that it really does pull me back to watching Goonies and, Flight of the Navigator and all those movies from when I was a kid. And I can just really enjoy it and not have to be so focused on, well, when's Vader coming? Where's the stormtroopers going to be? Where I don't, it doesn't feel like it's necessary. And it just feels like a fun ride, which is something I think that they had the first season of Mandalorian and they haven't had since. And I think that's why this show is so great. And it is disappointing that more people aren't watching it, because this is the most Star Wars-y thing to Star Wars in a number of years.
But we have to also remember here, Dodd, that just because maybe, and I always use, because they never release the numbers unless they're really, really good or really, really bad. Like, we don't know what the numbers were for Willow, but we know it was bad enough to be a tax write-off. And then they'll brag about, like, oh, The Mandalorian was the highest viewed streaming show ever, things like that.
Right.
With this one, I can only judge it off of our YouTube views, which have been solid, but not like Mandalorian numbers. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good show or that it's not going to stay on Disney Plus and that people won't keep revisiting it. I think especially as a lot of parents watch this and they go, oh, this is great, and they tell other parents about it, it's one of those word of mouth shows that's eventually going to have, like, I think, a really good following. And I don't know how expensive it was to make. I think that entirely is going to be the basis for whether or not they make season 2, but I hope they do. Dodd, what are your thoughts so far on the show?
I feel like it's that moment from Deadpool and Wolverine, be like, welcome to the MCU. You're joining at kind of a low point kind of thing effect with the skeleton crew. I think that this is a great show. Had this been put before the Acolyte, I think that we would have had a lot different response to people experimenting with Star Wars. But I think that this past year for Star Wars has been really rough. I've loved everything that they've put out, but I'm a hardcore Star Wars fan. And you can't avoid the fact that there's a lot of people that have pushed away from it because of that. And now, not only did they have a lot last year, but it was not only like that it was poor, it was that it was, or poorly received, it was that it was a lot. And this was like the tail end of that. We're going into a period where, like, only thing we're getting is Andor this year. So we're going through a bit of a drought now, but I think that people have had a lot of it, and what they've had of it, they haven't really liked. And so that's really what's affecting it more than anything that's storytelling element wise, because as you said before, it still borrows a lot from similar Star Wars elements we've seen before. Hidden planet that no one can get to, kind of thing. Like, that element we've seen tons in Star Wars before, but it doesn't connect to the original trilogy, and it does something on its own. All of these things is what I enjoy greatly about it, but I think that people just have a bad taste in their mouth with Star Wars lately.
And well, people who are longing for the EU days, right? Some of those terrible books that came out in the 90s and early 2000s, and some of them were great, but Skeleton Crew feels more like those books than anything else, I think. And they're so if that's what you're longing for from Star Wars, I wish people would recognize that and be able to come and find it and enjoy it for that campy, over the top, almost goofy at times Star Wars, but it's still in that universe and it feels very much like it should be there. And I think that's a big challenge, right? You've seen even the Acolyte at times didn't feel like it was in Star Wars. I mean, it was that show, there's a whole nother conversation, but it didn't, the Skeleton Crew fits in its slot perfectly. And I think that that's a real win and a credit to the directors and writers of this series.
Star Wars is one of those things, like, what did the Supreme Court say about pornography years ago? I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
Like, some of those EU novels I would read and go, ooh, this just feels more like a straight-up science fiction novel. It's not fantasy enough. And I actually thought, I mean, look, the Acolyte experimented with structure, but it was about Jedi Knights. Like, it's hard to get more hardcore.
Which is what's so weird
Star
about
Wars
the
than
Acolyte,
that.
right? Yeah.
I think Star Wars is one of those things, like, what did the Supreme Court say about pornography years ago? I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
Like, some of those EU novels I would read and go, ooh, this just feels more like a straight-up science fiction novel. It's not fantasy enough. And I actually thought, I mean, look, the Acolyte experimented with structure, but it was about Jedi Knights. Like, it's hard to get more hardcore.
Which is what's so weird
Star
about
Wars
the
than
Acolyte,
that.
right? Yeah. I agree.
I never really thought it doesn't feel like Star Wars. I just thought it was a disjointed story I thought it was a good story told in the wrong order. But you guys watch the show. You know I don't normally like flashbacks unless they're structured correctly, which, by the way, in the show Creature Commandos, structured perfectly. That's exactly how you do a flashback show. The great thing about this show is, though, it has given us a lot of space for theories. You know, at Atten, at first we were like, oh, it's the First Order. I'm glad it wasn't.
Yep.
We still have Jod. We still have some other things, the supervisor and all this stuff and how it's going to connect. Going into the last episode, Dodd, do you have any theories on where you think this show's going to go?
Where I think this show's going to go.
Or is there, you know, I mean, are we going to get more kids space pirate stuff in season 2? Is
I definitely think
the planet going to be destroyed? What's going to happen?
I definitely think this is testing the waters to see if there could be kind of a space pirate wing of Star Wars. There was rumors about a space pirate Star Wars game that they were talking about making recently. They haven't made any formal announcements about it yet, but they could be seeing public interest in those kind of things. And we also have a DLC coming out for Star Wars Outlaws that is specifically focused on Hondo, Anaka, and like the actual space pirate side of Star Wars.
Yes.
And hopefully we get to see how he fell from grace. Because I think Outlaws takes place before Rebels, right? It's like 10 years
Outlaws
after.
takes place, after Rebels.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So
after Rebels?
Yeah, it would be after Rebels. It would be...
okay.
That's right. It's between Jedi and Empire. Yeah.
Jedi and Empire,
Okay, so we'll still see Hondo. Never mind.
Right.
He'll be down on his luck. That's all I want.
But maybe we could still get some backstory. Like, that's what I want to see. I mean,
Yeah. I love Hondo Anaka.
I would that would be somebody that would be great to see in the finale here, as well as I'm always a sucker for Cad Bane. He seems like he fits in this this environment as well. But I think that
Filoni's probably keeping all of his action figures in his own chest, though.
There was a wolf here, you know, and they killed him off. So I don't know why they didn't leave the wolf for Dave Filoni to bring back.
Guarantee you they did that as a middle finger to Filoni. I kind of feel it seems like there's two different wings of Star Wars right now. There's the Filoni-verse, and then there's all these other people like John Watts and Leslie Headland who get to do their thing.
Right.
Almost to where it's like, okay, so the kids like Filoni, give them Filoni, but we're trying to develop new things that aren't just reskinned OT characters like Ezra. I actually hadn't thought about that till now, but gee.
Very different philosophies in those universes about wolves, is what I would say.
Think so, yeah.
But no, I hope in this last one we do get Jod's backstory, because I want to love this character so much, but I also know that if it feels like a poorly written pirate character, then I'm going to hate him, and if it feels like a great pirate written character, I'm going to love him. And so that's really like I'm holding. I haven't really theorized about anything other than hoping that he ends up being the pirate character that I love, and not just like you guys biffed your one shot.
You guys heard it here from Dodge Sites, the physical living embodiment of that pirate guy for the movie Dodgeball. Pete, what about you? What are your theories going into this last finale?
Well, you know, I think, and mark this down, because if I'm right, I'm going to gloat for forever, but I might not be right. Snowball is the key to everything. I believe that little four-eyed rat is the key to everything. Sort of like the mice in Hitchhiker's Guide. I said
that in our breakdown video that we put up
there
yesterday. I was like, I guarantee you this guy is the true Captain Rennet.
Yes.
And he just goes, and he's a hermit crab who goes in and out of different bodies and droids.
I don't know what the connection. So see, we're on the same wavelength, Ryan. I'm glad you had me on, but I think this is why I think there's something to it, because this show has done something that a lot of Star Wars shows hasn't done really well, and that it has paid off every Chekhov's gun so far in a very subtle way, very well done. And when the rat came out of the decapitated SM-33, he could have stepped on him. He could have booted him. He carefully swept him to the side. So there's some connection. The bilge rat knows something, but I don't know what.
Is that an actual bilge rat? I thought bilge rat was just a pirate term going back to antiquity.
According to Wikipedia, I looked it up just to make sure I didn't miss anything on his backstory as I was coming up with this crazy thought.
Son of a gun, I wish I'd put that in. That's great. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Because, bilge rat's old. It's been around forever.
Yeah, no, but that's what they actually
Dodd knows that. Dodd calls people bilge rats in his everyday life. He's an old-timey sailor slime.
Right. It's a common term. But I will say that the pirate mythos, though, is when you see a bilge rat come across there, it's because water's coming up from the bottom of your ship, so it means that you're sinking, kind of thing. I don't know if there's any connection there, but it seems like there's a little bit of something there. They're an omen, for sure.
Yeah, could be something. But I think
I'm curious. It's definitely something in episode 8, Pete. I will, if you're right, shout you out, and if you're wrong, I will shout you down.
Shout me out.
tell the people you were wrong.
Fletcher blew it.
Disinvited from ScreenCrush Rewind. Never again. Hate him. Sorry, I cut someone off there, but I was so excited about my line, I didn't realize who it was. So,
No, but that's okay.
Pete,
I
any
think-
other theory?
Yeah, I don't really have a theory, but to sort of carry on to what Dodd was saying, I think the show absolutely has to stick the landing. I think this show has to be able to end after this episode. It can leave a couple things hanging. It could leave, I don't want it to leave anything open for a couple reasons. Number one, these kids are getting older. So by the time they get to shoot another series, another season, these kids are going to be, the only one who's going to be fine is going to be Neil, because he's just a big blue.
The Stranger
animated-
Things problem.
Right, right. We're going to have a 42-year-old 11.
Yeah.
But I think the show will end with SM33 and Wim. So here's my Willy Wonka kind of thought.
All right, go.
There was one thought, that one comment that Wim made. He said, I still have to take my assessment. I'm wondering if this is his assessment somehow, and he will go off with SM33 and Snowball, and his job will be to protect At-Atten somehow. So I think that's my sort of tie it all together theory. It's probably way off. My theories usually are, but I think it will end with Wim coming out as having identified what his purpose is.
I'm going to throw out two theories. One, I've already talked about in our breakdown video, and I think it's very likely Stephen Fry, the supervisor, is going to be a droid, like that Star Trek episode I keep referencing, where it turns out a computer's been running this planet for hundreds of years, which, by the way, when they made that episode of Star Trek in the 60s, was a totally revolutionary idea that we now live in. So I think that'll for sure happen. I think, though, if I'm going to get crazy, Wim's mom is dead, and we know that KB had some kind of accident. So even in this perfect suburban world, like this communist utopia where the trains always run on time, there's still some accidents happening. And I wonder if maybe these things, like, if you're going to do a tease for season 2, it could be, well, the droids say, don't let the kid know how his mom really died because she was killed because she uncovered the truth. I mean, you could still be setting up how the First Order was funded or something like that, or just something even more nefarious about the planet. It could be. I mean, they were setting up this mystery for so long, it wouldn't surprise me. So, guys, we're going to leave it there. But Pete, Dodd, thank you guys so much. Both your social links are linked down below. And now I got a special preview for you guys about our live show. I cannot wait to show you guys this new live show. We're doing Pee-wee's Playhouse for Nerds with exclusive breakdowns, puppets, and you only get to see this stuff in the live show. But most importantly, my favorite part of the live shows is getting to meet you guys, be in the same room, face to face, and just saying a bunch of stuff that's probably going to get me canceled. I went to karaoke and just screamed. Ticket links are below. So what did you guys think of the episode? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments or on our free to join Discord server, or you can @ me on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Threads. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.
I hate that ScreenCrush and Ryan Airy. You see, I, Paul from the Heavy Spoilers channel, I also hate small dogs because obviously I'm a bad person. Now I know something that's really going to get them. I'm going to send them to a far away, far distant city where they can never come back. I'm sending them to
Houston, Texas.
Well, I don't know, boss. That seems kind of mean.
shut up or I'll give you a fresh one. Now activate the Destructo Beam.
Dog person! Wow, are we in Houston, Texas?